All right, welcome back everyone to Erica's Easy Prep course. We're in our third session. And Erica, you want to take us away on what we're going to be doing today? Just a little recap.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Isaac. Welcome back. So we're going to briefly go over our reading problems from last session. It did take us a while, so again, it's going to be a brief reminder. Then we're going to cover something that we haven't covered yet, which is writing and language. We're going to go over some grammar, and then we're going to do some shorter exercises, and then also more passage-based exercises. So, and then also we're going to do some math and stuff. But so yeah, so to get started, you can go ahead and I'm going to start sharing my screen soon, but I want us to basically, yeah, I'm going to give you the, refresh for the classroom code and everything. And there is a link for a Google Doc, and I have basically everything we're going to cover on the Google Doc. So if it's hard to read on my shared screen, you can just go there and look at it yourself. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So as always, if you guys have questions, don't hesitate to, ask. You can put things in the chat too if you're more comfortable with that. Sometimes it might take me a second to see the chat because I'll be distracted with doing, other things. So, all right, gonna get started. All right, so there's the classroom code. You guys already know, pretty familiar with that. So I'll leave that up for a second, just for the newcomers, and then I will launch into what we are doing. Oops, sorry. There we go. All right, I think that's probably enough time. Okay, so it's over here. This is our passage from last week. Still on the Google Doc. Oh, also, the link for the Google Doc is in the same area from last week. So if you want to, go look at that at the same time as me. Pardon me. Okay, so I think we start at number 6. I believe we did number 6. Yes, thank you, W. So, which means we need to look at number 7. It's been a week, so it's not as fresh in our minds, I know, but sorry, I thought I had a chat question. I did not. Okay, so question 7. We're looking at lines 46 through 48. Just gonna zoom up very quickly. And so 46 through 48 So that's right here. So 45, 46, 7, 8. So Madonnas don't wear hats like that. Rose hasn't changed much, but Phoebe has. Why? She's a regular beauty, answered Archie, staring with all his might at the dark-eyed young woman with the brilliant color and glossy black braids shining in the sun. Okay, so the question asks, it says question 7, Archie's comments in these lines, 46 through 48, Madonna's ... beauty, primarily indicate that he, the answer is B, finds Phoebe to be beautiful. And the reason that is because when you isolate and just look at the lines that they're indicating, the main point of what he's speaking about is Phoebe. So yes, he mentions Madonna's wearing hats and he mentions Rose hasn't changed much, but Phoebe has. Why? She's a regular beauty. So most of what he's focused on is Phoebe and how she's beautiful. And again, if you have more questions, once we go through everything, if we have time, you can ask the questions there, or you can, as always, email me. So question 8 is, here's question 8, lines 52 through 56, that follows Mac's comments in lines 51 through 52, reveals that Mac is blank. Okay, let's go back up here. So 52 through 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're looking at basically this paragraph. It says, dear old uncle, doesn't it seem good to have him back? Was all Mac could say, but he was not looking at dear old uncle as he made the fervent remark, for he saw only the slender blonde girl nearby and stretched out his hand to meet hers, forgetful of the green water tumbling between them. So it's asking what this paragraph is showing you. What it's showing you is that, yes, he's speaking to his uncle, but he's not actually paying attention to him because we know that for sure because the last clause, like in the last sentence, it says he was forgetful of the green water tumbling between them. So the point is, if he's forgetful of the green water tumbling between them, and he's also, if we go up to the beginning of the paragraph, when it says he was not looking at his dear old uncle, we see that he's kind of seems like he's focused on something else. And then this clause here, 4, he saw only the slender blonde girl nearby. So it shows what he was paying attention to. And if we remember from last week, in this kind of older style of writing English, the 4 indicates because. So when we see this kind of antiquated language, we can kind of translate the word for in some instances into because. Rereading it, it'll read as, but he was not looking at dear old uncle as he made the fervent remark because he saw only the slender blonde girl nearby. So that's kind of more of a modern reading of that line. So now we're going to go into question 9. I'm going to zoom quickly to question 9 just to show it. It can be inferred that Rose is both pleased and pained when she views her cousins from the ship because we are not familiar with what inferred means. We can kind of tell that it means that we're going to, so sometimes if we don't know what one word means, we can kind of get the context of what the whole sentence or question is asking or saying by reading the rest of the sentence. So even if we don't know what inferred means, We know that it's going to have to do something. We're going to have to figure out something to do with Rose being both pleased and pained when she sees her cousins from the ship. But just in case we didn't know, inferred means that it can be like understood. It can be taken from, something that you can take from what you're reading. Chat question. Yeah, that's a good synonym, Brianna, is assuming, based on the rest of, based on what we read regarding her being both pleased and pained, we can assume. So that's a fairly good synonym. So we're going to go back up to the passage. Excuse me, I have allergies, part of my sniffles and everything like that. So we're looking for something that refers to Rose being both pleased and pained. So not just pleased and not just pained, but both, and in regards to her cousins. So the options are: she feels exhausted and confused after a long journey by sea. We don't see any indication in the passage whatsoever about her being, just looking at the rest of it, about her being confused and exhausted, so we can go ahead and mark that out. Then the next option is she believes her cousins don't recognize her anymore. So there was no indication that her cousins don't recognize her. But also, one of her cousins at one point said, in line, what is this, 46 and 47, that Rose hasn't changed much. So if you wanted evidence as to why B is incorrect, there's a hint that that's an incorrect answer. C, answer choice C, is senses that her relationship with her cousins has changed. This is the correct answer. I'm going to go to D first, though, to say why D is incorrect before I explore C. D, the answer choice D says, concludes that her cousins' lives have gotten better without her. Now, as with many of these questions, there are multiple ways you can arrive at the correct answer. Of course, I'm going to show you different tips and tricks and stuff, and you should choose the way that resonates with you and makes sense to you. So now why I say that is because with answer choice D, I'm going to zoom down back to D so we can see it while I'm speaking about it briefly. With answer choice D, concludes that her cousins' lives have gotten better without her. Now, if you remember from the question, we want to see where she's both pleased and pained. Pleased and pained. So this answer would be, this answer would just point to her being pained, because I don't see how her concluding that her cousins would be better without her, that's not really, I don't think she would be pleased with that. Because that kind of, that implies, or we can infer from this statement, gotten better without her, that she was like a nuisance to them, that she brought them down. So that's a negative thing. So even just from, without referring back to the passage, if we keep in mind what this question is asking, again, it's asking about her being both pleased and pained. This is only showing pain right here, because that's sad. Like, you would think that someone would be better off without you. That's just pain. So it's not answering the question fully. So we can rule D out without even going back to the passage. So now, question C is the correct one. Senses that her relationship with her cousins has changed. So notice it says changed. Change can be good or bad. So right there, we can't automatically rule it out like we can D, because D is just negative. Whereas change, you can change, again, for the better or for the worse. So let's go back up to the passage really quickly. Excuse me. So we had covered we went over the last paragraph last week, but that is a hint that answers the question. Let me see which, it's like the last sentence. Yes. No sooner were they shut up in a carriage, however, than a new and curious constraint seemed to fall upon the young people. Constraint? Constraint is a word that it has a kind of a negative connotation. Connotations are kind of underlying meanings. So that's how we can have, synonyms and stuff like that. We have words that kind of mean the same thing, but they have different connotations. So they have different underlying meanings or underlying vibes or feelings. So constraint has an underlying negative connotation. Yes, exactly. Holding back, yes. Brianna says constraint is like holding back. Exactly. And it's constraint kind of, when you think of something being, you think of constraint, think of like, yes, being held back or kind of being like bound, like if you were tied up with rope or if you had handcuffs or something. That's being constrained. So it has kind of a negative feeling to it. And that's where we can get a sense of the pain that Rose is feeling. So that's pain. But let me see, as far as pleasure or pleased, her being pleased, she speaks on in the other, there are other, oops, something popped up on my computer, sorry about that. There are other parts of the passage where the cousins are very happy to see each other. In this paragraph over here, the 30s, lines, the late 20s to 30s, they're very happy to see her. I see her and Uncle Phoebe, hooray for Cousin Rose. And even here, she, Rose kissing both hands delightedly on the other as she recognized familiar faces and heard familiar voices welcoming her home. So those are different areas where you get a positive sense of Rose seeing her cousins and her family again. I'm gonna zoom past right back to 10. Okay. So question 10, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Pardon me. So we're again thinking of previous question is asking about her being pleased and pained. So now we have to, when you have questions like this, you definitely have to refer to the passage because it's referring you to the passage. So, you can't really rule things out just by looking at the answer choices, of course. So the answer here is choice D, and that is, that refers to lines 64 through 67. No, I'm lying. I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry. The answer is, choice D, it's 76 through 79, sorry. So again, this last paragraph that we kind of dissected last week. So this last paragraph, it really shows how everything has shifted into a kind of a negative territory because rest of the passage up until that point is pretty positive. The cousins are responding very positively to each other. So answer choice D refers to line 76 through 79. So I'll just read them quickly. Archie remained to help his uncle get the luggage through the custom house, and the others escorted the damsels home. 6, 7, 8, 9. No sooner were they shut up in a carriage, however, than a new and curious constraint seemed to fall upon the young people, for they realized all at once that their former playmates were men and women now. So we did go over that passage a lot. There's a lot there. There are a lot of clues that could help you to answer the questions. By clues, I mean certain words that hint at a shift in the previous feeling or vibe that the passage was giving you. One of those words that I had spoken about last week was the word however. However signifies a change. However implies that whatever came before is about to be contradicted in what comes next. So yeah, so we'll go to, so again, number 10 is D. So we're going to go to the last problem, which is 11. Question 11, as used in line 71, the phrase, quote, affectionate impartiality, end quote, most nearly means. So the answer for this is A, restraint. It can be tricky though, because you might not be familiar with some of these words like aloofness. Like, what's an aloof? What is that? You know, you could probably figure out what tenderness means if you don't already know it. You probably know what enthusiasm is. Probably also know what restraint is. But sometimes on the SAT and, you know, once you get to college, you're going to be faced with words that you're not familiar with. And you may be tempted to choose the word that you're not familiar with because you think, oh, this is a new fancy word. I'm not familiar with it, so it must be right because this is a hard test and la, la, la. No, it's better to go with what you know to be true. Now, if you can mark out the answers that you know for sure are incorrect and leave, let's say we don't know what the word aloofness means. Let's say we know that A is incorrect, C is incorrect, and D is incorrect. We know that for sure because we know what those words mean. Then you could choose B. But if you think that you know what A, C, and D mean, but you're not sure about B, but you kind of feel like the answer choice is A, then you should choose A and just leave the word that you don't know, leave it alone. Just go by what you know, because sometimes this tests like these, they're gonna throw words in there that they know you're probably not too familiar with, and that is intended to trick you. So that's just a test tip. Now, back to question 11 specifically, the answer choice, again, just to be clear, is A. And it's restraint. So we're going to go quickly to line 71 to see why this is the case. All righty. Pardon me. So 71 is right here, but I will start at the beginning of the sentence. She was with difficulty released from his embrace to fall into the gentler ones of the elder cousins, who took advantage of the general excitement to welcome both blooming girls with affectionate impartiality. So reading, actually, if you're not sure about what the question is just from reading what line it's referring to, you can go to the line before really quickly just to give yourself some more context. So I'm going to read the line before, because I feel like that line it referred to isn't like quite enough. So Jamie was clinging to her like an ecstatic young bear. So right there, that gives us this idea of this, well, basically that paints a very vivid picture, like a very excited little animal that is clinging to you and like you can't tear them off of you because they're so happy. So then the next sentence goes, she was with difficulty released from his embrace to fall into the gentler ones of the elder cousins. So if Jamie was a young bear, it's saying this older cousin, this elder cousin is gentler. So right there, he's less ecstatic than a young bear. He's gentle. I'm going to reread it. Who took advantage of the general excitement to welcome both blooming girls with affectionate impartiality. So we know what affection means, affectionate, that's like soft and caring and stuff like that. Impartiality, let's say we have no idea what that means. We know, because we read this sentence and the sentence before for context, that there's a difference in how Jamie reacted to her versus the elder cousin. So Jamie was doing the most, basically. Jamie was too excited and was acting like an animal. And that is in contrast to the gentle cousin, because, you know, hugging someone like a bear is definitely not gentle. So we know that, we're going to go back down to the, so we know that the elder cousin is going to be different from Jamie. And again, we know that it's A because I told you at the beginning, but when you, sometimes these questions in the passages set up for ways to compare and contrast things. So in that part of the passage, Jamie, I'm going to zoom back up, sorry for being confusing. Jamie is contrasted against the gentler cousin. So Jamie is acting like a young bear, which is the opposite of restraint. I'm going to go back down to the question. Jamie was tender. Oops, sorry. Jamie was tender. Jamie was enthusiastic. So if we're kind of contrasting the two cousins, we're going to mark out C and D because Jamie was those things, but we're referring to the cousin that showed affectionate impartiality. That was the elder cousin. So we're left with two choices: restraint and aloofness. Aloofness has a negative connotation. It's kind of like being standoffish. So the elder cousin was not standoffish. It said that he welcomed them. He was affectionate. So that is against what being aloof means. So it is restraint. Now, so that is the rest of the reading. We're going to go into language. So session 3, it's a little jumbled, but get the picture. Session 3. Now what we're going to do is we are going to cover some grammar, some like little grammar problems, questions, and then we're going to do a passage-based exercise that has, I believe, 10 or 11 questions. These smaller questions are kind of like some warm up for, you know, grammar. So, first question. Alrighty, I'm gonna zoom into this. Again, it's still on your, not your, sorry, it's on the Google Doc. You wanna kind of look at it yourself while I'm speaking. So, okay, question 1. More than half a decade after the magnitude 7.0 earthquake that leveled Haiti, Serious social and public health problems tolerate, including inadequate housing, political corruption, and the spread of cholera or cholera. Now, with this, with some of these writing and language problems, questions, it'll show you the underlined, so the underlined, oh, it logged me out, sorry. The underlined question or the underlined word, sorry, is what you're paying attention to. So you're either going to have to leave it as it is, that refers to question choice A, no change, or you're going to have to change it to another word, B through D. So sometimes, again, just a tip or trick you can do is you can read the sentence without that underlined word to kind of get an idea of what the entire sentence is saying, and then refer back to that underlined word to see if that underlined word is helping the sentence to say what it's trying to say. So I'm going to reread this sentence without that underlined word. I have a comment or a question. C is your answer. Gonna get to that in 1 second. 1 second. Pull up something else really quickly. Okay. So we're gonna read it again without the underlined word. More than half a decade after the magnitude 7 earthquake that leveled Haiti, serious social and public health problems, blank, including inadequate housing, political corruption, and the spread of cholera. So, without even trying to see what that underlined word, how it fits in the grand scheme of the sentence, we see that this sentence is telling us about at more than half a decade, so 5 years after that level 7 earthquake, serious social and public problems, blank, and then it goes on to list the serious social and public health problems. So it includes inadequate housing, political corruption, and the spread of cholera. So I know this underlined word is going to support the serious social and public health problems continuing. So, so the word tolerate doesn't really make sense because tolerate means that it allows or that it doesn't really like it, but it allows it. So serious social and public health problems don't really like but allow, including inadequate housing, political corruption, and the spread of cholera. That doesn't make sense. So we know we're gonna have to change this so we can rule out question A. Does anyone else want to contribute to what they think the answer is? We got C from Divya. C. I'll give you guys like a minute to see what you think it is. Does anyone else have any guesses? So I will go ahead. The answer is C. So the answer is more than half a decade after the magnitude 7 earthquake that leveled Haiti, serious social and public health problems persist, including inadequate housing, political corruption, and the spread of cholera. So we know it's C because the beginning of the sentence, it's setting up how, when it says more than half a decade after something, that's kind of giving you the idea that, okay, some time has passed. It's setting up the idea, it's implying that it's been a while, but these problems are still occurring. So pursue doesn't work because pursue help, so public health problems pursue. Pursue means to seek something out, to chase after it. That doesn't make sense at all. D, keep going. So serious social and public health problems keep going, including inadequate housing, and etc. Keep going is getting closer to the right answer, but it doesn't fully explain what's going on as much as the word persist does. So we'll go to the next question. So this is touching on the effective language use and honing in on precision, as according to Khan Academy. So I'll go ahead and read the question and then we'll answer it. I'll ask you guys what you think the answer is. You can say it in the chat if you like. Some residents were surprised by how Senator Nikita Kapoor voted on the tax bill, but she argued that her intentions had been crystalline from the beginning of her campaign. So give you guys a second to answer it. If it says B. We have a B. Do we have another B? Do we have anyone that disagrees with B? Going once, going twice. All right, so the answer is B. And we know this because, I'm going to reread the sentence. Some residents were surprised by how Senator Nikita Kapoor voted on the tax bill. Right there, it's saying that some people were surprised by how the senator voted. Then we have a key word, but she. So right there, because of that word but, we know that we're going to get something that contradicts what came before the word but. So what came before the word but? What came before the word but was that people were surprised by how the senator voted. So we're about to see something that contradicts them being surprised or why they should be surprised. So, but she argued that her intentions had been blank from the beginning of her campaign. So if people are surprised by how she acted, and then we have the word but here, we're going to see that after what follows after this word but, it should be something that says that they shouldn't have been surprised. And we know that just by reading the word but. So we're going to try to find a word that makes them being surprised. Sorry about that. We're going to find a word that shows that they should not have been surprised, because that word but tells us they should not have been surprised. So just rereading, but she argued that her intentions had been limpid. What does that even mean? Sheer means kind of see-through. That doesn't make sense. Or clear from the beginning of her campaign. If you don't know what crystalline means, sometimes words tell you what they mean, even if you haven't seen that exact word. You can see the word crystal in there. So you can imagine it has something to do with crystals, if you're not familiar with that word. So, so her arguing that her intentions had been crystal something, just going off of if you're not familiar with the word crystalline, that doesn't make sense. So clear is the only one that makes sense because we know the word but is here and it's a major changer in this sentence. It says that whatever came before is going to be contradicted by what comes after the word but. What came before is that they were surprised by how she voted, but so what comes after should be that they should not have been surprised. And her being clear about her intentions shows that they should not have been surprised. Clear about her intentions from the beginning of her campaign. So B is the correct answer. Excuse me. So we will go ahead and get started on the more passage-based language problems, I guess, because that is, a little more involved. I'm gonna zoom down. We have some more practice here though, if you want to practice on that. And then if you want to ask for what the answers are or anything like that, you can always reach me by classroom chat or even email and stuff. We have enough time. We'll circle back to these. So the writing and language passage. Before we get started on this, I'm going to tell you a couple of things to keep in mind. So when we're reading the writing and language passages, we are going to, so basically it's testing our grammar, what words mean in context, the command of evidence, meaning do the paragraphs and stuff provide evidence for what they're saying, and how we express ideas. So that's what the writing and language passage is going to cover. So I want you to keep in mind some basic grammar rules. And this might seem very basic, but just humor me. So a sentence is or equals a subject plus a predicate. Now I might be like, what is a predicate? But I'll explain. The subject is going to be a noun or a pronoun. Noun or pronoun, those are just things. Let's say things that the sentence is about. Plus the predicate. The predicate is the verb. It includes the verb phrase. Verbs, of course, are actions. So it's going to have the verb, and it's basically what the subject is doing. I'm making a distinction in this way because sometimes when you have questions regarding grammar, it can be very easy to lose track of what the subject is. But if you're ever confused about a grammar question, you can just look at the sentence and remind yourself what the subject actually is and make sure that your verb phrase, your predicate, and your prepositions and everything match the either singularity or plurality, can't get it out, of your subject. What I mean by that is your subject singular which means by itself? Or is it plural, more than one? So we want to keep these things in mind when we're doing, well, when we're reading passages, but more so when we're doing the reading and writing section. So with that said, I am going to let you guys read this passage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you like 10 minutes to read the passage. And if you have extra time, answer as many questions as you can. Again, it's available on the, pardon me, on the Google Docs sheet. Just scroll down. So it is 3:28. We're going to come back at 3:39 or 3:40, whatever. 3:39 actually. And we're going to get into the problems. I will also say that when you're reading these passages, sometimes it's easier. This might be a little tricky because we're not in person, so you have to keep scrolling up and scrolling down, but feel free to do whatever works for you. But basically, with these writing and language passages, sometimes it's easier for me to, read everything up until that question. See, it says number 1. And then when I get to that question, it's easier for me to answer it in the moment because what I just read leading up to it is more fresh in my mind. So you might want to try that, but you don't have to if that doesn't work, because again, there's a lot of scrolling involved here. So you'd have to I did mark the questions. So sorry. This is the passage, 1, 2, 3. And the questions come right after. So you can do, that's question 1. You can do it like that if you like. Oops, sorry. But yeah, as we are not in person, there are, some virtual hangups and stuff like that. So without further ado, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So actually, we're going to come back at 3:40. I'm going to give you a few minutes to read this and answer questions as you can. And if you have to go slow, it's better to go slow at first and practice and then get faster than go fast and miss a whole bunch of questions. So we will come back at 3:40. All right, guys, we should be finishing up. So we're going to go ahead and get into the problems. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second. as I pull up another page. Give me 1 second. Just want to make this easy as we go over these problems. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Alrighty. So I wanted to do this so we can see the questions at the same time as the passage. So here we go. So, oops, sorry. Okay, so before we even start reading the passage, we could have read the instructions for the questions. And these read, for these questions, you will consider how the passage might be revised to improve the expression of ideas or to correct the errors in sentence structure, usage, or punctuation. So grammar, basically. Some questions will direct you to an underlined portion of the passage or a location in the passage. Others will ask you to think about the passage as a whole. Many questions include a quote, no change in quote option. Choose that option if you think that the best choice is to leave the relevant portion of the passage as it is. So now, what I like to do with these passages or these problems, the writing and language problem is, as I mentioned before, to read the passage up until the numbers and then go to that question that it refers to. Okay, so let's get started. Judith Hernandez and the Chicana Artistic Voice. Judith Hernandez's art career began in Los Angeles during the socially and politically turbulent 1960s. While enrolled as a graduate student at the Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles, Hernandez met fellow student Carlos Almaraz, one of the founding, members of the Chicano artist collective known as Los Four. So we hit number 1, so let's go see members of is what is underlined as number 1. So we're only going to be trying to determine if we should change members of, nothing else. So what do you guys think about number 1? What answer did you get, if anything? Brianna says A. Divya says C. Any others? We have A, we have C. All right, so let's go over it. So the correct answer here is actually A. But let's try to read it as Divya suggested, with replacing members of with C. While enrolled as a graduate student at the Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles, Hernandez met fellow student Carlos Alvarez, one of the founding members who created and belonged to the Chicano artist collective known as Los Four. So I'm going to read it with the correct answer, which is no change. Hold on, I have a chat. Did you change your answer? Yeah. Basically, yeah, once you read it out loud, it's obvious it's not as concise. Although, let's see, one of the founding members who created and belonged to the Chicano artist collective known as Los Four. That's technically not incorrect, like grammatically, but you're right, you want to keep it concise. Another chat comment? Yes. Yeah, Brianna, you're right. Divya said it already says one of the founding members. Yes, so it does start to be redundant once you read one of the founding members of who created and belonged to the Chicano artist collective. The founding member, the word founding, already takes care of who created and belonged to. So you're both right, it is redundant. So let's go to the next question, or yeah, the rest of the passage. So members of the Chicano, all right, I'm gonna start reading from here. At Alvarez's request, Hernandez joined Los Four as its fifth and only female member. Hernandez became well known for her work with this revolutionary group of artists who are credited with, all right, let's go to number 2, credited with authorizing Chicano art as its own distinctive school of US American art. Let's go to number 2. So we're looking at just the word authorizing. So what did you guys get for number 2? We got B, we got B. Does anyone else want to input any answers or questions? Awesome, thank you. B. Yeah, and B is correct. So we know that A is incorrect. Well, A would mean that we keep the word authorizing, because when it says Hernandez became well known for her work with this revolutionary group of artists who are credited with authorizing Chicano art as its own distinctive school, ... Authorizing doesn't make sense, because authorizing means you have some authority. That hints at some kind of like some kind of entity or some kind of group or organization that has authority, maybe like the government or the police or something like that, that has the authority to authorize something. You have to have authority to authorize something. So they didn't necessarily have authority. These words are similar. So that's when it becomes important to pay attention to connotation and denotation. Well, connotation more so. Denotation is just quite simply like what the word actually means. And connotation refers again to the underlying more specific meaning of each particular word. So establishing makes more sense because it speaks about, in the paragraph or in the passage before we got to number 2, we are told that they were founding members, and that hints at them establishing something. Establishing means they kind of started, and it's going to continue once they start it, once they establish it. Permitting refers to permission. So if we say who are credited with permitting Chicano art, that implies that someone else was trying to have Chicano art as its own distinctive school of American art, and these group of artists permitted them to do that. So that doesn't really make sense. And approving, let's read it with approving. Hernandez became well known for her work with this revolutionary group of artists who are credited with approving Chicano art as its own distinctive school of American art. So again, these words are similar. Yes, they did approve Chicano art as its own distinctive school of American art, but that word approving, that hints that they are some kind of official organization that whose job it is to approve or disapprove. Like people might submit things to them and they approve or disapprove of it. So that doesn't really fit the overall tone of what that sentence is trying to communicate. So we're going to skip ahead to another problem. I think I want to do number 5, actually, because we're approaching the end of our time. So I want to try to cover things that are a little more tricky. Number 5. So okay, might not be able to see that whole thing. Okay, so the writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the writer make this deletion? And the deletion it's referring to is number 5. Chicano artists sought to mirror the challenges faced by Mexican Americans, often by challenging the xenophobic stereotypes of Mexican Americans in American culture. So I'll give you guys a second to tell me what you think the answer is to number 5. And it's okay if you didn't get it, if you didn't have enough time to answer it from when we paused. You can try to answer it now if you want, or you can wait. So we have a C. Someone's saying C is the correct answer. Do we have any other answers? Okay, so I'll go ahead and answer that. So should we delete this line in the paragraph? So I will read the paragraph without that line to see how it flows. Chicano art began as an outgrowth of the more general Chicano civil rights movement, a socio-political initiative that began in the 1960s to promote social progress and change for Mexican Americans. However, since the vast majority of Chicano artists were men, much of the Chicano artwork of the 1960s and early 1970s represented the experiences of Mexican American men, failing to represent some of the unique struggles faced by their female counterparts. We got another answer for C. So it sounds like we're given two options. We can delete that underlined sentence, or we can leave it in. So A and B refer to deleting it, C and D refer to leaving it in. So we got a couple people saying that they like C. Now, I would be inclined to agree. It is C. Why is it C? Because so once you realize with questions like this, once you realize that you want to keep that sentence in, you can go ahead and just stop looking at A and B, because A and B are talking about deleting it. So we already crossed off A and B. So now we're just looking at C and D. And I say that because that'll save you time when you're trying to figure out, decide on an answer. So you're not, considering all these possibilities. It makes it easier for you to do, decide on the right answer. So we're looking at C and D now, because the paragraph didn't sound quite right when we, it felt like it was missing something when we read it without that sentence. So now we have to decide, why do we need to keep this? Okay, well, C says it's because it helps to develop the main topic of the paragraph. D says it's because we should keep it because it effectively transitions between the topics of male Chicano artists and female Chicano artists. Now, for D to be the correct answer, it would have to mean that if it's saying it effectively transitions between the topics of male Chicano artists and female Chicano artists, transitions means it changes into or blends into. So that means for D to be correct, it would have to mean that we blended into one of these topics from the other. So that would mean that before this sentence, we had to be speaking of male Chicano artists or female Chicano artists. And then after this sentence, we started speaking about the other one. That would hint at that transition. So let me go up a little bit so you can see before. So that's the rest of the beginning of the paragraph. So before sentence 5 or sentence number 5, the fifth problem is referring to, Chicano art began as an outgrowth of the more general Chicano civil rights movement, a socio-political initiative that began in the 1960s to promote social progress and change for Mexican Americans. So right there, that's the part before. So if D is correct, it's talking about, again, transitioning from the topic of male Chicano artists to female Chicano artists. So it's not talking about any gendered artists here. So again, I read it from up until what number 5 is referring to, the sentence that number 5 is referring to. So because of that, we know that that answer is incorrect. And instead, since we already crossed off A and B, and we whittled it down, the choices down to C and D, we just proved that D is incorrect. Sorry, there's a siren in the background. I'm gonna mute myself for 2 seconds. Okay, it's mostly gone, I believe. So we just proved that D is wrong because we just read the part that came before what number 5, the fifth problem, was referring to, that line. And we also can validate that C is correct because it helps to introduce what the rest of the paragraph is about. Also, so let me go back to the beginning here. We're almost done for the day. The beginning of this paragraph, sorry it's a little choppy, but this is the beginning of this paragraph here. The beginning of the paragraph talks about Chicano art how Chicano art began. Chicano art began as an outgrowth of the more general Chicano civil rights movement. So when we go back to the line that number 5 is referring to, Chicano artists sought to mirror the challenges, et cetera, et cetera. This is telling us what these Chicano artists were trying to do. So that introductory sentence to this paragraph, it starts to tell you, it starts to hint at what this paragraph is going to be about. And then this line that number 5 refers to, it further fleshes that out, because it starts with talking about what Chicano art began as. Then, it says that Chicano artists sought to mirror the challenges faced by Mexican Americans. So it's further fleshing out and it's helping to develop, to use the language in answer choice C. It's helping to develop what this paragraph started off explaining. So C is correct. Another general tip and trick is when you're reading challenges, whether reading passages, sorry, I don't know why I said challenges. When you're reading passages, whether it's in the reading portion or the writing in language, it's always helpful to try to keep the main idea in mind. Some of these passages are really boring, and it's like, why do you care? You know, why would you care about what they're talking about? And that's understandable. This one's kind of cool because it's talking about Mexican artists. But you want to start to practice active listening by asking, okay, what's the main idea here? What are they trying to tell me? Before you start reading a passage, say like, okay, they're trying to tell me something. They're communicating something. What is it? And as you're reading, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Engaging in active reading can also help you to stay focused and paying attention to the more boring topics. All the topics might be boring for you, and that's understandable too. But you know, you might like some, you might, you know, dislike some, but that helps to keep you focused. A tip that Isaac actually said, helped him, was using your pencil to follow along as you're reading, so you don't have to reread things several times. So again, just another tip that can, like, you know, try it out. If you're having issues, like you keep finding yourself reading the same thing over and over again, you know, try these things and see if they work for you. Because, you know, different people are different and different things help them. So we are at 4 p.m. So technically this is when we would stop, but I don't mind continuing for a few more minutes. Anyone has any questions, or if you guys want to continue going over the passage that we were just doing, if you want to finish answering that, we could do that. Actually, let me share my screen again. So could you tell me, please, in the chat, actually, hold on one second. Tell me, please, in the chat what you'd rather do. If you guys want to, you know, if you've had enough for today, you want to see me back next week, then you can leave, or if you want to continue with the language passage that we were doing, continue reading. All right. Brianna, what would you like to do? I'm going to go down the list. Yeah, we could do math. We could do like we did last time, which was your idea, Bree, which was to finish the language or the reading passage the next week. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second as I pull up the math problem. Or I can just continue sharing it, it's fine. Excuse me, alrighty. So we'll do these two and then that should probably go to like maybe 4:15 or so. And then we can cover the rest of the reading and writing, pardon me, writing and language portion next week. I might just go ahead and give you the answers to the ones that we didn't do from the passage. I'll give you the answers to them. And then since the passage, you can kind of apply what we were talking about and finish it out. And then any questions you have, write them down and email them to me, or just ask me them next week. Alrighty, so all right, Caden started a new job selling dental chairs. He earns a base salary plus a commission for every chair he sells. The equation above gives Caden's annual salary, S in dollars, after selling C dental chairs. Based on the equation above, what is Caden's base salary? I'll give you guys a second to try to work that out. Alrighty, so we have a few answers. Let's see what we have. Agreed, Caden's base salary is 40,000, 40,000 as well, because 500 is the amount he earns per chair he sells. Yes, guys, that is correct. Now, how do we work this out? When we're doing these math word problems, they can be very daunting because it's like math plus words. It's like, what is going on here? But what you can do is you could start writing. What helps me is to write things out that they tell you. Don't pretend like you know what they're trying to say. Just simply write things out as they say it. So, okay, Caden started a new job selling dental chairs. He earns a base salary plus a commission for every chair he sells. This plus word is an important word because this is math. So we know we need to pay attention to that plus word. So again, I like to say how math is, another language, and we already know the basics of math. Really, it's just understanding the questions and what they're asking sometimes requires us to translate into our regular everyday language, which is English, right? So let's rewrite this phrase and start to make it more mathy, so to speak. He earns a base salary plus a commission for every chair he sells. So right there we have base salary plus commission, for every chair. All right, next step. The equation above gives Caden's annual salary, S, in dollars after selling C dental chairs. Now, we have another piece of our puzzle here. It says that Caden's annual salary is S. So let's make this more mathy, as we like to say, or math-like. So when we're doing math, we know the equal sign is the same as saying that something is, if something is equal to, that means it is. So S is Caden's annual salary. So that means that S equals Caden's annual salary. So it's a little loud outside. Sorry if you can hear the dog barking or something like that. So it says annual salary S in dollars after selling C dental chairs. So if it's his annual salary after selling C dental chairs, that means it's the entire salary. So Caden's entire salary. So now, so we can go to the other part of the first part, or rather the second sentence of the question, where it says he earns a base salary plus a commission for every chair he sells. So right here, if S is his entire salary, and we know that he earns a base salary plus commission for every chair, then we can put together these two statements. So we can say that if S is his entire salary, we know his entire salary is the base salary plus plus commission, for every chair he sells. So right here we have a format. We have an equation. It's using words. But what we can do is we can make this equation, we can match that to this equation here, and we can start to figure out what each thing is saying. So here, let's do a one-to-one matchup. We have S and S. So we'll draw S as it is there, equals. So S equals, so 40,000, 40,000 plus 500C. So we can just match up what each part of this equation is. We could see that so we have S and S is equal. So we're comparing these two statements here because they're saying the same thing. S and S equals the base salary plus commission for every chair. So when you have the phrase commission for every chair, that means that we know we're going to be multiplying something by something. So we see here, C, that he gets money for selling C amount of dental chairs. So this C is echoed right here. So this must be the commission for every chair, because the chair is the number of chairs are accounted for, or the number of chairs is accounted for by C. So therefore the commission is 500 C. So we've accounted for this right here. Make this purple. So this is this equivalent here. Now, that means that the base salary must be 40,000. Because see, we've drawn equivalents to, let's make this a contrasting color. We have drawn equivalents between our phrases that we concocted. So we can see that these phrases are saying the same thing, and we can kind of basically get what each one is saying by saying it in, saying it in English first, and then equating that English into more math-like language or math language. So yes, you guys were correct. We'll do one more and we'll go a little quicker on this one. Oops, let's have this all in one place. These children are loud. Those kids are really loud, so I muted myself. So you guys can do this, and then we will close out this session after this math problem. So as before, I'll give you a couple minutes to do it. Yeah, so go ahead, and then we'll review. Okay, we'll go ahead and review the answer rather. So we have 0.2. So this was not presented as a grid question. Actually, surprisingly, I could see how it would fit into one. And you bring up a good point of, I think next week we'll get into more graphing stuff because graphs are featured on the SAT, graphs and even in the reading and writing sections, and of course in the math sections, and also the grid in responses. So it does seem like it might be one, but it was not presented. Yeah, this was a, so Khan Academy just had me like type it in. So I guess in that way, sorry, let me see your chat response. Yeah, it was a fill in the box question. Okay. So Ria is using the above equation to investigate the carbon footprint C in kilograms of carbon dioxide for her morning commute. So we already see C equals carbon footprint. Oh, geez. I'll keep this all in one area. So let me just do that. All right. So it is the carbon footprint, during which S miles are by subway, and B miles are by bus, B equals bus. How many kilograms of CO2 per mile does the bus portion contribute to Ria's carbon footprint? So we can even just go back to where it says the carbon footprint C. That's in kilograms of carbon dioxide. So again, translating this, what this passage is saying that right here when we go to S miles, so it says S miles are by subway, B miles are by bus. How many kilograms CO2 per mile does the bus portion contribute? So if S miles are by subway, that means that looking at the equation, the CO2 or the carbon footprint from subway miles is going to be 0.1 times however many miles you go by subway. So then we're going to know that B, because of what it says right here. Oh, let me erase this actually. Looking up at the equation, we have that the, let me keep this all together. 1 second. All right, that's telling us that per every mile traveled by bus B, the contribution to the carbon footprint is going to be 0.2. So the question is asking us, how many kilograms of CO2 or carbon per mile does the bus portion contribute? So we're looking at CO2 per mile. We already know that the bus portion contributes 0.2 kilograms per mile traveled by bus, because we can tell by, by this part of the equation that refers to the portion that is the bus. Now, we don't know how many miles we traveled by bus. That's not really relevant to the question that's being asked. So it can be tricky to realize like what is actually being asked of you. But once you start to kind of organize which, basically what the equation represents and what the question is actually asking you, sometimes you will have kind of somewhat easy problems that already tell you the answer. So you didn't have to calculate anything here. And that's another point on the math section, because you have a math section that allows you to use the calculator and one that doesn't. So you might think that using the calculator, being able to use the calculator would help you, but actually sometimes it can hinder you if you use the calculator for every single thing, because sometimes once you just reason out what the question is actually asking you, and once you kind of chop up the paragraph for these math word problems and realize what is what and which is, what goes to what and which is where, you won't even actually need a calculator. And again, the calculator could actually slow you down. So it's very important to just kind of organize what the paragraph is saying for these math problems. Look at the paragraph. What is it saying? And even more so, sometimes it's better to just isolate the question portion and see what is it actually asking you. Because sometimes the details in the part of the question before the actual question is asked, sometimes they put extra information in there that's not really relevant to the question that they're asking. The question that they're asking is the most relevant thing. All right. So that concludes this session. Again, I think I will tell you what the answers were on the Google Classroom for the rest of the writing and language portion. For next week, we can go over the questions you have, and also